Seth Wickersham from ESPN, and Biography of the Quarterback American Kings is available wherever you get your books, right here on the Rich Eisen Show in person. And, I'd love to ask you about the question I always have with Kurt Warner. It's something that just recently came up as well, with the fact that Dylan Gabriel's now the second string quarterback in Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders is third. How in the world do you develop a quarterback in this day and age in the National Football League, certainly if he is not getting any reps as a starter? How does that happen right now? You can't.
And I think that, and Kurt helped me with the book, and we've talked a lot about this. He's so smart. Yeah. And he's one of the few great quarterbacks who can talk about great quarterbacking. He thinks about it at a really elevated and elite level. And I think that, there are few good and great quarterbacks, as we know. And I almost think there are fewer good and great coaches. And what you have is a ton of quarterbacks who go to these systemically bad situations. Sorry, the Jets, the Browns, the Titans, the Jets.
You didn't have to go back for seconds, Seth, but I understand your point.
But I think that what's happened is that we're so quick to label these guys as busts, even if they go to poor situations where they're not the only failure at that position there. And the coaches are under stress because they have to figure out a way to save their jobs, and they can't really develop a guy. And it's been an interesting thing. I didn't write about this in the book, but it's interesting to look at, there's an entire economy of quarterbacks now in the NFL that are kind of these retreads, where they were looked at as failures and they find another place to go. They learn from a really smart coach like Baker did with Sean McVay, or Sam Darnold did with Kevin O'Connell and Kyle Shanahan, and Geno Smith. And they can reemerge and have really productive careers, if they can just hang on and survive and kind of weather that storm of confidence.
Well, it's nature versus nurture sometimes, right? It's how you're born into the league, how lucky you are to be born into the league. And I think, for instance, J.J. McCarthy, okay, that's Justin Jefferson, and that's the quarterback whisperer of the moment, fresh off his Coach of the Year campaign, and Kevin O'Connell. Thumbs up. Great defense as well. Great job. Then you've got, obviously, Sam Darnold's is a perfect example of how he was born into the league. Zach Wilson's another one. So on and so forth. Nature versus nurture right there. But, the question or the conversation I always have with Kurt on the subject matter, and this is why I think Kurt is so, as you point out, expert on the subject matter. He would not have been able to do what he did on the magic carpet ride for the St. Louis Rams if he didn't have NFL Europe, or maybe the Arena League, or the obvious failure in Green Bay where he got cut. And the question is, I have for you, certainly since you and Don Van Natta know ownership in the NFL, having covered it for as long as you have, why does the NFL not put money into that? If I'm in the membership, there but for the grace of the injury gods go my team, where I'm down a quarterback 2 or 3, and this guy's not ready, and the whole season gets flushed down the toilet. Why isn't there more money put into a developmental league, or more money put into developing quarterbacks in the National Football League? Why not?
The ownership group, the membership, as they sometimes call themselves,
yes, sir,
they move slow unless an automatic profit is at stake, in which case they move really, really quick. And so I don't think they see the need for it. I mean, what makes the NFL unique is that, these guys make a fortune each year, regardless of how good they are. And so people tune in and watch whether, it's Justin Fields at quarterback or whether it's Matthew Stafford. And I think the most obvious answer is that even though I think intellectually they would understand the virtue of having a developmental league, they don't feel the huge necessity to do it because, some of these guys, winning isn't as important as you'd think it would be.
How about that? What an answer that was.
It's just true.
I don't even know how to follow up on something like that, because it just strikes me again as, the 49ers were very fortunate that Brock Purdy was as ready as he was when they finally had to get down to him. And other teams get down a quarterback 3 and the season's gone, and it's a miserable existence for their franchises. Seth Wickersham here on the Rich Eisen Show. How does it feel to have freaked out the entire city of Chicago with your book?
That was quite a ride. I'm not going to lie about that. I think that it goes back to what you're saying, though. Context matters. And having built an audience, it's like the situation that you're brought into and what you do with it matters, even though people they're not quick to see that. And so I think that what Carl and Caleb Williams were looking at around the time that I visited with them and in the lead up to the draft is look, Chicago doesn't have a great record with quarterbacks. Carl Williams told me, Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die. And is there a way to exert some agency over a future employer? And, they thought about it and they looked at almost every kind of, they were, trying to find lawyers and agents and anyone who had ideas that might be able to help them. At the end of the day, though, I think that Caleb was driving things. Caleb met with the Bears. Ryan Pohl said, we're drafting no matter what. Mm-hmm. He met with his teammates. He liked them. He liked Chicago, and he liked the opportunity. And he didn't want to do what Jack and John Elway did or with Archie and Eli Manning did, which is basically create an untenable situation. He didn't want to do it. And, even though it took a year, they got what they wanted, which is an innovative offensive mind in Ben Johnson, whose success is rooted in Caleb's success.
So you're saying, have you spoken to Carl and Caleb since then? Are they pleased with what is now in fact going on there?
I mean, I think that they're thrilled. I mean, I think that I haven't talked to Carl specifically about Ben Johnson, but I think Caleb, we met to go through things, some reporting in the book and stuff, and he had just been hired. I think that he had just come back from the press conference. Caleb had just go back to work out in Florida. And, I think he's ecstatic. And I think that when Brady retired for the final time, Caleb texted Carl and he said, I need 8. And Carl was out on the East Coast, and he's like, 8 what? Does he need a Costco shipment? Do I need to DoorDash something? What is he talking about? Right. And it was 8 rings. That's where he saw the bar, and that's what I think he wants. And you can't do it alone. Like we said, context matters.
Seth Wickersham here on the Rich Eisen Show. What did you learn about quarterbacking?
I think one of the most interesting things. The book is a lot about American ambition and American fame. And I think that quarterback has gotten so big, and almost from the moment it was started and invented by Walter Camp in 1906, I have it's not a history of the quarterback, but I have historical aspects. And almost from that moment, it was defined and held in kind of a lofty status within the football world and even beyond. But starting with really Bob Waterfield and Jane Russell. I mean, they might have been the country's first power couple in the 1940s. Here, the LA Rams moved from Cleveland in part because of Bob Waterfield's celebrity and Jane Russell's celebrity in 1945.
So Travis and Taylor are the first. They're the latest.
They're the prelude. And so I think that at this point, it's gotten so big that when you look at the makeup you need to be a successful quarterback, it's not just about throwing. I think you need to find people who can weather the fame. And I think that the people who do it really well, I think have that little piece of their personality where there's a hole that can't be filled, similar to a politician or a pop star where they need to be at the center of their own ecosystem. They need to receive constant adulation and love and encouragement. And
so
I think
the toughest position requires some sort of...
There's huge insecurity that goes on with it. You'll read about it. But
the confidence you need to play quarterback
among the greats,
is born out of insecurity,
I think that even among the greats, it's most acute. And I think that to me is really fascinating.
Brady's insecure?
Well, he did a roast less than a year after he retired. He sat at center stage, didn't he? Nobody forced him to do it.
We were there.
We were there.
And it was a good roast.
By the way, and again, for somebody who's chronicled the Patriots, it was therapy.
Yeah,
No, I was. And we talked about it.
Yeah.
That Brady's retirement ceremony that happened in New England a few weeks later wouldn't have been nearly as hunky-dory had there not been so much stuff gotten off people's chests,
It's a little crazy because I remember, I'm pretty sure we talked at the time, but, I did that big Patriots story in January of 2018 about, how the principals weren't getting along and maybe, would they look for a way out? And, that was that story was, I mean, that one, A, took off, and B, came under a ton of scrutiny. And like, I always thought, it'll age well. And I think that Brady coming out and talking about how frustrated he was and how he wasn't going to return to New England that offseason unless something changed, and how it was kind of on Robert Kraft to make it work, especially in regards to like Alex Guerrero and his role. It was a fascinating time. And then to think what they did after that, they kept winning. And it was just like, it revealed so many things about like the nature of success and both the ego and the submersion of ego involved. Fascinating story.
Now, I think I might be also inaccurate by saying that everything got worked out by the roast. Did you hear Bill Belichick's recent comment about being a college coach, that there's no owner or owner's son, he said from the podium.
He did.
Well, how did that one hit you, Seth?
I think he said it to Ben Volen, right?
Is that what he said? I thought it was.
I think it was the Boston Globe.
Okay, pardon me.
But like he, like I said, those things were real. The things that I was writing about them. Tom Curran wrote about them to an extent. But those things were real, and I think that look, they push the bounds of achievement in football, and it's not surprising that you would start to have some cracks in those relationships. But I do think that the way things ended in New England between, both Krafts and Bill, I think that that's going to take a little bit more time to mend than it did with Brady, if it ever mends.
Does he feel that he's in college because of that fracture? Does he feel that there was some sort of, nuking of his, opportunity to get a job elsewhere in the NFL? I'm just wondering where this comment might be coming from.
Don Van Natta and I and Jeremy Fowler wrote that story, that came out when he didn't get any jobs. And it looked like he was going to get the Falcons for a bid, and he didn't.
Right.
And we wrote that story about how, Kraft had told the Falcons you can't trust him. And now, did that cost him that job? I think it had some factor in it. And so, we've seen it from Bill. He said it publicly. He's gone back to the valuation of the Patriots before he got there and after he got there. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. But it is a fact that that the value of that franchise has gone up quite a bit. And, that he and Tom Brady and, a bunch of those great players have helped, the Kraft family quite a bit. And I think that, from the Kraft family point of view, he pissed off the greatest player ever who left, went out and won a Super Bowl. And then he, he struggled without him. And, the record is what the record was. And especially offensively, they just were never really able. I think when Josh McDaniels was there and Mac Jones rookie year, they did well and they made the playoffs. But after that, it never really clicked again.
So before I let you go here, knowing what you know about quarterbacking, and just if you have to put your marker on any quarterback 25 and younger in the National Football League right now, knowing what you know about quarterbacking, makeups of quarterbacks, where they currently are, what they've done so far, you put your mark on this person to win multiple Super Bowls.
Multiple Super Bowls. You're like, I'm going to put my Seth Wickersham.
I'm going
to go with JJ. How about that?
McCarthy?
Yeah.
Come on, don't just say that. You don't need
giving him what he wants.
Kevin O'Connell told me.
You really would do that over Jaden Daniels, for instance. C.J. Stroud is another.
Does Hurts count?
Hurts would. how old is Hurts?
Well, Hurts would be up there. I think Hurts.
He's already got one.
Yeah, 27. He's a little outside of the age range, but I will say this: I met with Kevin O'Connell for the book, and he, of course, was a great college quarterback, 4-year starter at San Diego State. And he got drafted by the Patriots, thought he'd learn from Brady and then take that knowledge elsewhere. Yes. And, his career essentially ended. And we talked a lot about those scars and how that informs how he coaches quarterbacks and looks at them. And one of the things that he did was when he was getting these tryouts with teams, he would try to make the wow throw, the John Elway throw, and, knock the coaching staff over with it. And he kept getting cut. And he realized later, he went back and watched all of Brady's game-winning drives in Super Bowls and big games, Montana's, Elway's, and what stood out was how mundane they were. Like, they looked like they were doing spring practice, even though the stakes couldn't have been higher. And he realized that, quarterbacking is really about, doing the obvious thing that's right in front of you at the highest level you possibly can. And I think that like that to me, there's a reason why Caleb Williams really liked Kevin O'Connell, as I wrote about, is that like he just knows how to speak quarterback, and I think that they're going to be really successful.
So you're not just saying JJ McCarthy because I'm a Michigan guy,
not because
but you see what his talent is, and it's in the hands of Kevin O'Connell, and that is why you're saying what you're saying.
The theme of our segment, context matters.
So does this book, American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. Get it wherever your book can be acquired. Seth, you now know where the studio is.
I love it.
I now see that you're a whole human. Come anytime you're here in Los Angeles, will you please?
Thanks, man.
Anytime. That's Seth Wickersham right here from ESPN. Get the book.